There are very clear signs that there are two regimes within the East African region that are crumbling. They are collapsing. Within no time, they will be poof, gone. Now I'm aware that many on this channel who are not very experienced in politics, na kunaendanga aje, and especially government paid bloggers, have no idea what I'm talking about when I point out clear signs of a crumbling regime. These youngsters have never read history. It is boring. They don't understand the basic truism. You cannot rule people by force. Even if you are a military government, you cannot rule people by force. Sooner or later, your regime will come crumbling down. Anyway, I want to give you three very clear signs that two regimes in East Africa are crumbling so fast, very super fast, that they'll be soon gone. In this season, when eyes are being opened like never before, I'd like us to highlight these three very key factors that tell you without doubt a regime is going down. Number one, the regime is exposed. You know, information is very powerful. And this should explain to you immediately why repressive regimes are very sensitive about the media and what the media are reporting. Very sensitive about bloggers. You know what is happening in Kenya currently, and even in Tanzania. For a reason that may not be very obvious or not very easy to fully understand, when a regime's secrets are exposed, it greatly weakens that regime. And this has happened right down through history. Even if you study the great Roman Empire carefully, you will notice exposure was very damaging and played a key role in the final fall of the Roman Empire. The Jomo Kenyattas regime understood this very well, and they guarded secrets like like nothing else. But when it leaked that a man called J.M. Kariuki had been collected at the Hilton Hotel by a man called Ben Geddy in March 1975, March-April 1975, the Jomo Kenyatta government was never the same again. And of course we know, in 1978, Jomo Kenyattas passed on and a new regime came into power. And of course regulars on this channel will know the super fascinating way Jomo Kenyattas was exposed and his assassins. Okay? The target, J.M. Kariuki, left behind something that was going to speak very loudly, even after they finished him off. He pretended to write a check as payment, because he was picked up from a restaurant. And in that check, he wrote at the back the identity of the person who picked him up, Ben Geddy. Kwisha maneno. That is how Jomo's goons were exposed. Of course, the exposure of the Ruto regime has been at another level. Hey, it is a miracle that Ruto is still in power. But according to history, not for much longer. That is guaranteed. You can take that to the bank. Very quickly, the other two major signs are when the regime starts responding with violence and desperate moves. And of course the third one is when the responses of that government start being ridiculed. When you see these three factors unfolding anywhere, then you should just focus on preparing for the next regime, whatever regime that will be. Right, let's zero in on those two East African regimes that are crumbling very fast. Tanzania and of course Kenya. Will you allow me to start with Tanzania? And please remember, as we have always said on this channel, because these two countries are dealing with the same powerful white master, okay, whatever happens in our neighbor's country definitely impacts us, will definitely have consequences in what happens in Kenya and in how quickly there is a regime change in Kenya. Please don't forget that. And so in Tanzania, the very latest development is that the government of President Samia Suluhu has shut down the biggest church in that country. Yeah, this is the Glory of Christ Church, which has right across the country, wait for this one, 2,000 branches. You know, we don't have such a church in Kenya. We don't have a church in Kenya, any religious organization in Kenya that is that large. And why has the repressive Tanzanian regime responded in this way? Well, it is because of the leader of this particular church, Bishop Josephat Gwajima. Now, Bishop Gwajima has been very loud and aggressive in condemning abductions. He has come out and said clearly that even Muslim sheikhs are being taken away from their homes and later found dead. You know, there's a member of this channel, a dear friend, whom we talk with frequently, who recently pointed out to me a Gwajima video, which was a presser, where he spoke a lot of deep things about abductions and the people who are behind abductions. And of course, this is very relevant also to Kenya. But that is a story for another day. It is a long, deep story for another day. Let me stay on topic today. But the bottom line is that this bishop understands. He knows a lot. He knows what he's talking about. Now, policemen were sent to enforce this closure of these churches. And do you know what happened next? There was a clash where stones were thrown by Tanzanians. Huh? Hold on a minute. We have never heard of anything like that happening in Tanzania. Eh? Have you? And of course the Tanzanian government has also shut down Twitter in that country, or X. Why? Because there is too much exposure of this government on that platform. And it should be rather obvious that is too little, too late. Too late. Mechelewa. Too late. Because the damage has already been done. This regime is going down. Incidentally, the most damaging exposure for the Tanzanian government involved the saga of the two activists who were tortured. You know, that was exposed to the international press. Now take careful note of the fact that Gwajima, Bishop Gwajima, very strategically started talking about these abductions after that exposure. Okay? In other words, he very strategically realized now the world spotlight is on Tanzania. Now is the time for me to come out. Okay? Because in a way, he is protected. Because now the Tanzanian government has to be very careful what they may want to do to Gwajima, who by the way is also a legislator, is the MP for Kawe. They have to be very careful in how they handle him. Yeah, because now the spotlight is on Tanzania. These draconian things which governments do are best done chini ya maji, when nobody is paying any attention. But now the whole world is paying attention to what is happening in Tanzania. And don't forget, elections, general elections are due this year in Tanzania. I believe in October. Kimeumana ama akijaumana? You tell me. Hey, things are serious. Things are elephant for this regime. And then of course point number 3, the government responses. People have started ridiculing them because they sound ridiculous. They don't make sense. For example, the government has come out and denied that they tortured Bwana Boniface Mwangi and his Ugandan female colleague. They have come out and denied it. Now, this is a joke. This is so funny because there is evidence, medical evidence. The two were carefully examined. They went through thorough medical examination and a report was produced. So the Tanzanian government is telling us this with no evidence, and the activists are telling us something very different with evidence. Very quickly, let us now come back to Kenya and let us skip the part of exposure, because that is on another level, unprecedented. So let's not waste any time there. Now recently, a member of the County Assembly Kitui, Jacinta Mwoni, was assaulted, was attacked right in the middle of her speech, actually at the beginning of her speech, where she was talking negative things about the Ruto regime. And by the way, in full view of a large crowd and cameras, including cameras on phones, capturing the whole drama. How damaging can that be? Now this MC has accused the Kitui East legislator, a very controversial man called Nimrod Mbai. Remember the man who assaulted Kenya Power and Lighting staff about 2-3 years ago? That same man, who incidentally has made remarks recently that talk against Ruto will not be tolerated. What happened to free speech? What happened to our poor constitution, 2010 constitution? Now, isn't that a response of violence and desperate moves by this regime? A clear sign that the regime is crumbling? I remember we mentioned all three at the beginning of my show today. That, in my opinion, is irrefutable evidence the Ruto regime is going down. And let me not even waste your time by going to point number 3 of responses from a government that the people are ridiculing, making fun of. Responses like the economy is improving, give Ruto time, 1 or 2 years, Kenya will be the next Singapore. Stories are jaba hizo. Okay? All excellent material for people to make jokes on TikTok against this government and on social media, don't you think? And let us not forget that a young lady, a software engineer, who put up a website to receive comments and opinions from Kenyans about Finance Bill 2 was arrested. And also, let us not forget, abductions are still going on chini ya maji. In fact, recently, there was an abduction that failed because wananchi turned up and said, no, where are you taking him? What has he done? Etc., etc. And those people who are trying to arrest these Kenyans had to back off. That is a very bad sign. It is a very bad sign. Because you know what it means? Even genuine criminals, it is going to be difficult to arrest them going forward. Because this government has clearly shown us that there's a very thin line, which is actually now non-existent, between arresting and abducting a Kenyan. What is the difference? You tell me. Because in Kenya today, there is no difference. And unfortunately, the big danger of that is that it is opening a door, a free-for-all, even for criminals. People who commit crimes against other Kenyans. How are you going to arrest them? It is obviously going to be increasingly difficult to make genuine arrests. Oh boy. I don't want to say things are boiling nicely in Kenya and now in Tanzania too. I don't want to say that. And I didn't say that. Now, in such an environment, it beats me how a respectable analyst can sit down and start analyzing political coalitions, political groups, strategies for elections in Kenya in 2027, or is it 2026, or even elections in Tanzania. How do you start to do that in this kind of environment? I don't understand. Because that is not the way politics works. And so, we should expect a lot of chaos, as I keep on saying, a lot of upheaval. But bottom line, kuna watu wanaenda nyumbani in Tanzania and in Kenya. And I'm well aware of the fact that governments in power, even when they're in trouble, usually look very solid. Extremely solid. Hakuna mahali wanaenda. That is how people usually talk. Until suddenly, the whole thing comes crumbling down like a house of cards. We have seen this thing happening so many times in so many parts of the world. Please wake up and see. Wake up and pay attention. Especially because this kind of thing comes with very dire consequences for all of us. I'm sure you know what I mean. I'm very sure of that. And one of the consequences are economic hard times, which we're already going through. Okay? Now, I don't know if you know this, but the very successful concept of a supermarket is an invention which is very recent. I don't know if you know that. And even more super fascinating, the invention of a supermarket, the modern supermarket, happened during a time of great economic depression. Did you know that? I found out this fact recently, and I was more than shocked. Allah! If you manage to get a little time, please research on a character called Michael J. Cullen. This is the man who is credited with being the inventor of the modern supermarket that we take for granted these days. Yeah? And his trade name was King Cullen Grocery Company in the United States of America. Let me not bore you with that story. Instead, let me put it like this. This guy, when the Great Depression started, was an employee who had nothing. But when the Great Depression ended, he was a multi-billionaire entrepreneur. Yeah, he resigned from his job and invented the supermarket and became super rich. That's the long and short of it. Which means that it is very possible that in these economic hard times we're going through, there are some people who will come out of it at the end very prosperous, very different. And that is why I'm still highly recommending my documentary, which I started putting together in the year 2019, titled How to Survive and Even Prosper in a Dead Economy. Now you can see details on the screens right now. Those who have already taken it in are saying that it's very entertaining, but also very informative and very comprehensive, because it even includes ebooks. Okay? For the better Kenya that we crave for, may we have many Michael J. Cullens coming out of these hard times that we're going through right now. Now, very quickly before I go, I want to play you snippets from my latest highly sensitive special report that reveals some shocking secrets of the Ruto regime that will enable you to understand very clearly why these people are behaving the way they are. Yeah, and you'll also understand many crazy things that have happened in our country, in the motherland, in recent times. Just listen in as you see the details of what you need to do to get this valuable information, as well as all my other previous special reports. I'll be back shortly. But we also know that something very strange happened immediately after she had been stopped and possibly arrested. Monica Kimani was allowed to make a call, and she made just one call, and within a few moments she was released with whatever she was carrying and allowed to proceed into the country. Now, how did that happen? Let me answer that question with the following statement. This DCI operation that stopped Monica Kimani at the airport was not a mission to arrest. And she was naive enough to make it. She should never have made that call. That call, that single mobile cell phone call, cost her her life. Now, with this information, we now understand many other things which happened immediately Ruto came into power. One of the first things he did, you will remember, was that he completely dismantled George Kinotti's DCI. Brutally, ruthlessly, and with speed. And at the end of it all, George Kinotti was out in the cold. And there was a brand new DCI boss, appointed and supported by William Ruto. Now I will not speculate, but what I'll do is I'll tell you what I would have done if I was the newly appointed stooge, sycophant head of the DCI. The first thing I would have done would have been to go and get all the evidence that had been so much painstakingly put together by Uhuru people and George Kinoti. As head of the DCI, I would have access to that. I would have gone and gotten the whole lot of it and destroyed it. We also understand now why very early during the Ruto presidency there was talk of extending the term of the presidency from 5 years to 7 years, and this talk did not go away. In fact, a crucial piece of evidence. Now, you're only an M-Pesa message away from getting your hands on this information. Yeah, only Kenya shillings 2,999. You can see the details on your screen. Please move quickly, because this offer is going to end very, very shortly. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.